We are live. Well, hello, everybody. Good evening. I am so excited to be here tonight. Beautiful day here where I am. I hope that it was a beautiful day where you are. For those of you who may not know me, I am Angela Orr. I'm a certified life coach, certified heart math practitioner, which is a mindset coach and pharmacist of 36 years, as well as a serial entrepreneur. And tonight I am here. I come live on Facebook to share inspiration, information, things to really help people, because that's really what I like to do, is to make a difference. And I am so thrilled that I have a guest tonight. So I'm just looking up information. I have Dr. Veronica Riera Gilly, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
With me tonight, and I am so excited to have her on with me. She is a pharmacist, also an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur like I am, and she has a website which she's going to be. We'll put it in the comment section, and she'll be talking about it. And she is owner of Prairie Fire Pharmacy Consulting. And her passion is really to maximize health. She really takes a very well-rounded view of health for her patients and what she does to help them. So rather than me putting words in her mouth, I'm going to let herself introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Veronica, and I live in Sherman, Texas. And I'm owner of Prairie Fire Pharmacy Consulting, and I help patients maximize their health with minimal medication. And I'm a certified yoga instructor, a mind-body medicine practitioner, a certified lifestyle coach for the diabetes prevention program. And I really enjoy helping patients embrace healthy living, aging, and dying. Oh, I'm also a board-certified geriatric pharmacist.
Wow. I didn't realize that. I think I did, but you have so much that you do. It's just really fascinating. And, I think one of the things that we've talked about, Veronica, that I really wanted to talk to the audience about is dying and living, or living and dying. You can look at it from both views. And I think that this last year of 2020 with COVID really had people thinking about death and dying maybe a little bit more than what we're used to, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It really weighed on me as we saw what was going on with COVID, and having been a former hospital pharmacist and thinking about the patients who were having to die alone without their family members, or maybe not alone. They had the nursing staff and the doctors there, but not to have your loved one at your side. And it got me to thinking that I need to be more vocal with talking to people about how they want to die, and encouraging those hard conversations. Because in my family, I realized what a gift my grandmother gave to us by knowing exactly how she wanted to die. We didn't have to make any guesses about her care. And she had such a peaceful passing because of the choices that she made. And it was such a gift. So to be able to give that gift to someone else, to have a good experience with the loss of a loved one, would be a wonderful thing for me to share. My grandmother was very clear that she wanted to die at home, and she was having some chest pains, went to the hospital, and it was determined she was having a heart attack, which shocked all of us. She didn't have hypertension or any of the other risk factors that we normally associate with having a heart attack. And she was 91 years old. And they said, "You need to go to the cath lab." And she said, "Nope, call hospice and send me home." And I had family members call me and say, "Do you think she's making a good decision?" And I said, I think she is. She's 91. She's had a really full life, and this is her choice. So that means it's the right choice. And we're not guaranteed the outcomes on the other side of her going to the cath lab. She was in a frail state. She'd had a fall and a pelvic fracture the year prior. So we know that those falls, when they're happening, really indicate that they're in a frail state, and they're more likely to have mortality come sooner rather than later.
Yep.
And to be able to explain to my family, I think she's making a good choice. She's frail. We may not see her after this procedure. She's not guaranteed to make it through it. And another thing to consider was I have small children, And they don't let small children into the ICU. And this all happened prior to COVID, so we didn't have that complicating visitation. But had she had a long recovery in ICU or even passed away in ICU, my children would not have gotten to see her and say goodbye. So she chose to go home, and we had 2 more weeks with her. And almost everyone in the family had the opportunity to come and see her. And
Wow.
we shared the best kind of soul food, which was stories and laughter.
Yep.
And shared some really good meals together. And it was a gift. And we didn't have to stress that, did we make the right decision? We didn't make it. She did. And it was her decision.
Exactly. And I think that, as pharmacists, we're so used to helping people to continue their life or to get over an illness or to cure something or to mitigate something. And so this is a whole new realm for us, not just about the death and dying, but even about, the preventative care, because we're so used to coming in at the last minute. And I think it's just wonderful that, we can use our skills and our knowledge to help people think about preventative, because I think a preventative is maybe talking to people about death. That's a preventative, we talked about it before. Death is the only thing you're guaranteed of. We're not getting out of this alive. And so many people have been so afraid, and I think that of death, because they just don't know, and they don't have anybody to talk to about it. And I think that's the message that we can get out also as healthcare providers. Like my sister is going to be going for a procedure. And so they were like, do you have a living will? Do you have this? And she didn't. So she was talking to me about it. And I said, oh, okay. So she said, no, I'm starting the conversation. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it now. And that was that was during the time that we were talking about having this, conversation, you and I. And it's just like, I get it. Because if I didn't even get what she was saying, like, oh, let's have that conversation, because I'm a little older, I'm going in for surgery. You don't know, I need to have everything in place so that nobody has to, like you said, at the last minute, make decisions for her.
And then wonder if you made the right decision because you didn't know their wishes.
Exactly. And is that something that you really work with people on? Because I think earlier we were talking about also, which was interesting, I didn't know that there was a death doula.
Yes.
I know about a birth doula.
Yes. And there are people to help hold our hands and guide us through this experience that we've not been through. And typically we only walk through that experience once for ourselves.
Right.
And there are people to help guide you through that.
Which is really, really awesome. I was on one night, you were having a conversation with a pharmacy owner out in the West who helps people pass. And I just thought that was so fascinating that, again, there's this whole awareness now, more and more of people stating their wishes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was Jennifer Palazzolo. She owns Flatirons Family Pharmacy in Colorado.
Yes.
And she is one of very few in her state that dispense the medical aid in dying prescriptions.
Yep.
And I think it's a beautiful service that she provides to the families to give them some choice when they're faced with a very aggressive and terminal illness.
Exactly.
And she described such beautiful things that people would gather their families together and have a little ceremony, and then their loved one would take it and everyone is there with them. And it sounded so beautiful and peaceful when there were a lot of other unknowns and other stressors in their diagnosis, and to be able to have that peace and make that choice.
Exactly. And I think what really struck me about that whole conversation too is how, after the situation, where the person passed, sometimes naturally without even the medications, and then sometimes with it. But again, what struck me, and I think what we're talking about here too, is the family members, how thankful they were and how grateful they were that they were able to have this experience and it not be so painful.
there was a lot of closure and positive pieces in the grieving process that are brought in with the planning. There's, oh, I can't think of the name, but there's a type of grief that's very hard to deal with because there's so many unknowns. Like if you lost a loved one because they went missing and you never found out what happened to them, ambiguous grief, that's the word I'm looking for. That the ambiguity in grief can make it much harder to process and to deal with. And so we're removing some of the ambiguity around having a concrete choice. So I think it's a beautiful service that she provides. And it's interesting that some patients don't ever use it, but the fact that it's there and they have that available to them if they need it.
Yep.
That just having the choice, even if you don't ever take it, having that choice is powerful.
Very powerful. And I think that's what we were talking about before we got on live. What, I'd like to have your perspective as far as like 2020 and how, how people didn't have the choice. And I think, again, as healthcare professionals that we are, I think our job is to do no harm, number one, no matter who you are as a practitioner. And I look at, and hindsight, of course, is 2020, but I look back to last year and the choices that were made for people and the choices that were made for the people, population as a whole. And I think everybody did the best they could based on the information they had at the time. But I think in looking back now that it wasn't always good.
I would agree with that.
So I want to just get your perspective on some of the things that happened in 2020 and what you'd like to see different in the future, or what you think you could talk to your patients or people that you talk to about it.
There's a lot wrapped up in that question.
I know. So maybe just start with 2020. Like, is your perspective? And not obviously, and for those watching, of course, not political. I'm not going to get into that, but just about surrounding choices of people with their health care and with their death.
Well, with their health care, I feel that 2020 showed us how lacking we are in preventative medicine. And there was this idea that, oh, I'm healthy, I've got my blood pressure under control with all these medications. But we saw worse outcomes in these patients that had all these pre-existing conditions. And you and I know that many of our medications are Band-Aids, not cures. Yes. And I think it really highlighted the need for holistic and functional medicine care that seeks to assess the root cause of the problem rather than just covering it up. Because if we could look for the root of these symptoms much earlier, or any of these underlying conditions, if we could look for the root cause and start to treat that and create a better baseline of health, I think we would have seen a smaller number of people that were so adversely affected, because we saw people that had healthier eating habits, healthier lifestyles, adequate vitamin D levels, ate more green leafy things, and had a more whole foods diet. All of them did better, even if they did contract COVID.
Exactly. And I think, like you said, the root, so many chronic diseases are caused by lifestyle, and that includes eating, what you drink or don't drink, like getting enough fluids in, but of course, not alcohol. I'm talking about, water.
Moderation, all things in moderation.
Moderation, all things. And, but the other thing that I look at too is mindset, because that's what I do and that's what I work with. I know you're a functional medicine from the perspective of the whole body, and I do the mind, because the mind even comes to me before the body, because if you don't have the right mindset, it's really hard to then have the right lifestyle.
Absolutely. I cannot tell you how many patients I've encountered that when I'm talking to them about their blood sugar, for example, they will tell me flat out, it doesn't matter what I eat, I can't control my blood sugar. And with that attitude, we know that is true. When you believe that you can't make a change, if you think you can't, you can't.
Exactly. If you think you can't, you can't. If you think you can, you can. So I think, like you said, for last year, we learned that, being healthier to go into the situation
Mm-hmm.
gives you far more advantage. And that's something that we could go, talk hours on, I think, from my perspective, as far as mindset, and your perspective from, functional medicine and the whole holistic approach that we take. If you get in that situation, though, I think what's interesting is, I don't know if interesting is the right word, but I think, again, a lot of things came up last year that really, I feel like it's a call for action for those healthcare professionals to talk about it.
Absolutely. We need to talk about what kinds of care are acceptable to us before we're faced with the choice. Talk to your loved ones about, is a feeding tube okay or not okay? Is using a breathing tube, is that okay or not okay? And breaking down several of the things that could happen, and there's always an if, and, or but somewhere in there. We could come up with all kinds of hypotheticals, but just start talking about it. And you don't have to have concrete answers. Just even letting your loved ones know, I do want you to do everything to save me if I'm really young and haven't had any other predisposing factors. Yes, do all that you can to save me. Or no, if I have a serious diagnosis, then no life-saving measures. You can say things like you want comfort measures only, or you could specify, I want compressions without a breathing tube.
Right.
And you can get really specific. And I don't guide patients through all the nitty-gritties of planning an advance directive. I usually refer them to someone else. And there's a lot of good resources online to start reading about that. And it can vary by state. So it can be helpful to look at advance directive guidance in your state. And just letting your loved ones know what your wishes are and what you think, what is an acceptable death to you. And you can tell your loved ones, I hope to die at home. Do everything you can to keep me at home. Even if that means I don't get a breathing tube or I don't get a feeding tube, whatever those interventions are, to tell your loved ones, this is how I hope to go. And they can advocate for you when you can no longer advocate for yourself.
And I think starting the conversation is probably one of the best things that you can do, or start writing down, even if you don't have the formal paperwork, because like you said, it varies by state, because in some states it's okay, in some states it's not. But even if you just start writing down, even if you're not a senior, like even myself, it's gotten me to think, like me and my husband, like I want people to know what I want if something were to happen to us.
Yes.
And like I said, like last year, it looked like a lot of people didn't have choices.
And I think starting the conversation sometimes is easier if we don't start with the medical pieces. Maybe we can start by asking each other, what kind of playlist would I want to have at my memorial services? Or who would I want to speak at my funeral?
That's great. I love that. I've never thought about that, but that's really, like you said, maybe that's a good way to start the conversation. That's not so scary for people.
Yeah. And I have found it's more fun if it's fun to talk about death, but how do you want to be remembered? What kind of stories do you hope that people will tell about you? And I was speaking with a colleague, and she told me this beautiful story of a woman who didn't want to miss out on the stories that people were going to tell about her. And she had a terminal illness. So they had her funeral before she died. And she said, don't tell it after I'm gone. I want to hear you say it. I want to hear it with my own ears. And I thought, that is beautiful, because it is too late if we share these wonderful memories with everyone but the person who touched us the most. So I thought that was a really beautiful thing to hear about and to have on your radar.
Wow, that is real. I've never heard have the celebration of life with the person there whose life you're celebrating.
Absolutely.
That is wonderful. And I think too, like, what would be really interesting too is not only, how you pass, that's important to let your loved one know, but also like, what do you want to happen once you pass? Do you want to be scattered over the ocean? Do you want to be buried? We were talking before, and maybe you could talk about a green burial. That's becoming more and more common.
Yes. Well, I'll put in a little plug for my monthly conversations. They happen on the third Thursday of most months. We took a break for June since I was on vacation. We're starting back up in July. And we have conversations in embracing mortality. And next month, I have Ann Hoffner coming, and she is the author of the Natural Burial Cemetery Guide, which gives you a breakdown of all 50 states and different places where you can have a natural burial. And natural burial is where you would be buried generally without embalming, but sometimes for different reasons, embalming may be necessary. So they choose different chemicals, less toxic chemicals, to embalm the body. And then they bury the body in a natural area, and they don't use machinery to dig up the earth. They hand dig the graves and then carefully replace the plants so that it doesn't look like there was anything disturbed. And they leave nature as it is and let nature return you to the earth.
That's wonderful. I had a customer. I owned two pharmacies, as you know, and one of my customers, his mother had the first green burial in Maine.
Oh,
and like, it had been a long, long time when it became, I don't know, legal or however you want to put it, and stuff. Yeah, it was really, really important to her. So, so that's another great thing to have a conversation with your loved ones about.
Absolutely. And a lot of people don't know that you don't have to be embalmed, that it's not required, that it's often convenient, especially if you want to have the body available for viewing several days after. But it's not required because they can store you under refrigeration and slow the decomposition process so that you could still have a visitation with your loved one's body if you so choose. And you can even keep bodies at home. There's not any restrictions in most states that say that you can't keep your loved one at home and have a home funeral. And there's a home funeral association. And they give you information on how to safely store a body so that you slow the decomposition at home. And it's using ice packs under the body or dry ice. And there's different methods. So you can go check them out for more detailed information.
Oh, that's very interesting. Do you have any of that kind of information on your website? In the comment section, after we're done, I'm going to put Veronica's website, as well as I'll make sure you know her name so you can follow her, so you can see, are the conversations generally the monthly ones, or those on your website also announced, or just on your Facebook page?
They will be. Right now, they're just stored on my computer. I plan to do some editing and put them up with some nice sound editing. And we also have Q&A at the end with the speakers. And sometimes the conversations get very deep and personal. And so I'm currently editing to make sure that any of the guests who did not realize, I tell everyone that it's being recorded, but just to be respectful, since we're talking about such deep and personal things, I give them the opportunity to have some things edited out. So
yeah. Okay, great. Well,
they will be posted. I do have plans. So that was a long way to say soon we'll be able to see these conversations, at least the meat of them. Not always the Q&A at the end, but definitely the meat of the conversation. Yeah. And we've had some great topics. Really enjoyed. We had a practitioner from Canada. I was trying to think of which province in Canada, but I couldn't tell you. Her name is Shireen Wilson, and she talked about conscious grieving. And it was a beautiful conversation to talk about walking through the process with such awareness and giving yourself grace. We here in the United States, we have this attitude of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You shouldn't be sad. Move on from the grief. And the fact of the matter is, you're never done grieving. That
never.
One is always part of you, and there's always something that's bringing up their memory. And just because 10 years later something triggers tears, it doesn't mean you haven't grieved properly. It means that you've loved someone deeply, and there's no right or wrong way to grieve. There may be healthier and better ways to grieve than others.
Mhm.
There's no right or wrong way. And she talks about moving through that process consciously, giving yourself grace, and then recognizing when very strong emotions in someone might actually be grief, some misplaced grief.
That's very interesting. Oh, yeah, that one I would be really interested in watching, because I think that, again, going back to what I do in the mindset is that, I look at here in the US, somebody has a family member who dies, you get 3 days of bereavement.
Yeah, that's not enough.
It's like, how can you get over something like in 3 days? You can't. But with that being said, I think that, again, it goes back to, the mindset that you're going to always have these different emotions that come up, and it's not a good or bad thing, but how you deal with them and and what I mean by deal with them is, do you allow yourself to feel it? Do you try to suppress it? Sometimes, allowing yourself to feel it and walking through it is the best thing to do, because you don't get trapped into that mindset of, oh, you need to just get over it. No, mindset to me is about raising your emotional intelligence while being a human. And so you raise your emotional intelligence by really just recognizing where they're coming from, whatever different emotions you have. And like you said, maybe something 20 years later, you think about something and it's about that grief that maybe you're still going through from your parents dying, or I had a brother who passed away when it was like 40 years ago, and he was the youngest, and he was the first pediatric hospice patient in Rhode Island, and he died at home. So it was just really, so there are still times that I think about my brother Shad, and all the different things that the family went through back then. So it's just, I don't know how I got off on that, but that's what happens, when you're talking about real life stuff, and then all of a sudden I'm like back with my brother and all that hospice and that whole experience that we had, and it's just allowing yourself that grace it's okay to think about it and to sometimes be sad about it.
Absolutely. And where there's great grief, there was great love.
Yeah. Yep. And there was great love. So, well, I am so happy that we got on together. I know that we said about 30 minutes or a little bit, less, or more or less, and it's been that long already. And I just want to say, can you believe it's been like 28 minutes? So, like I said, I'm going to put some things in the comments, but are there any other things that you'd like to just bring up, or that we talked about before that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, we did talk about using the Death Deck. This is not my product. Oh, there we go. Which way?
There you go. It's in the middle now.
The Death Deck. So this is not my product, but this was created by an ER nurse, hospice nurse, and one of her patients' spouse. And they put together this deck of cards because they saw the need to bring up these topics and just start to have those conversations. So they made this deck of cards. You can play them like a game, and they suggest sometimes pairing off with family members and going through the cards and guessing each other's answers, and then being able to talk about I didn't know you were going to say that. I would have thought this, and make it a fun and playful thing. And they have deep dive cards where it's an open-ended question, and they have really fun cards that have multiple choice answers. If you find that, wow, that's a big, broad question, I don't even know, they give you some multiple choice to choose from. So I pre-selected one that I love to ask my pharmacist friends. So is it okay if I ask you from the deck?
And this is not staged, because I have not heard this question yet. I'd love to have you ask me.
So if a drug were created to provide immortality, would you take it? You got.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, the questions they provide, if you couldn't come up with your answer, was A, totally, who wouldn't want to live forever? B, nope, one lifetime is plenty. And C, maybe, if I could lock it in at my hottest age.
Now that is an interesting, but my hottest age to me depends on where I'm at in life. Like my hottest age when I felt great and this and back in college. But I feel like now's my hottest age because I'm so much wiser.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that one. It's like,
So
would it be my physical hottest age or my mental hottest age?
exactly. So because I'm like, now's the time. So this is an interesting time for me to tell you my view, just my view for myself about death. I cannot wait till I die. And I am not suicidal. I don't think I'm going to die until I'm 80 or 90. I had this in like 88 to 90, maybe 95 that I'm going to die. I'm going to live till. But my faith is so deep in God. And that's a personal belief. Everybody has their own. But my faith is so strong that I know that I will go to heaven and I will see Jesus and God. So to be here forever is not in my plan. So I'm looking forward to the day that I die. If the nuclear bomb goes off, I'm running towards it. I want to live healthy while I'm here. And I feel like I have a mission and I have people that I'm here to help. And that's what I want to do.
I'm with you. I know I would not take it. And I look forward to what's on the other side. I don't know that I'm excited about dying because living is fun. And I feel like we have a purpose that has yet to be fulfilled. So I'm not ready yet, but when that time comes, I feel like I'll be very ready to embrace it and not accept a lot of life-saving care. Ooh, I thought of a resource I wanted to share. Dr. Jessica Zitter, she was an ICU physician turned palliative care physician. She wrote a wonderful book called Extreme Measures, and it's about finding our way to a better end. And she discusses in detail what some of these aggressive medical interventions that are trying to prevent death, how they're in some ways prolonging our suffering, and to think about them and reevaluate what it means to love someone and the kind of care that you would give when you love someone. And one example that was beautiful that she gave was feeding tubes. She said, we equate feeding people with love. That's how we show our love. That's how we care. How can we not feed them? And when you have a body that's shutting down and you're pouring fuel into it, you're backing up the system and you're creating a hardship on the body. And so to think of a new way to show your love and care for this person who's passing, rather than having to give them physical food nourishment, can we give them nourishment in another way?
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. You're definitely going to have to, I'll go back onto the feed, Veronica, and put like my website and everything. And maybe you can go back on and put your website and like the card deck, information about that, where people can get it, as well as that book. I think that would be really great. So
I'm happy to share those.
Share those resources. And on my website, everybody, I have, I just put on there where you can download a free guided meditation, as well as a breathing technique that I use it's the foundational breathing technique that I use. It's heart-centered breathing. And so I invite you to go to my website, which I'll put on here to get those resources so that we can live healthy, so we can die healthy, right?
Absolutely.
So, well, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you were my guest tonight. I was really excited to have you on. And I'm going to let you have the parting words.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on our conversation tonight. It was wonderful to share my mission of helping people embrace healthy living, aging, and dying. And I hope you'll join me in July on the third Thursday of the month for our next conversation. It happens on Zoom. You can register on my website, prairiefirerx.com, and go to the events tab. You can sign up there, and we would love to see you on that Zoom conversation when we talk about green burial.
Wonderful. I plan to be there. So good night, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast.